So welcome back from the coffee break. We have an exciting panel planned for you. In this next panel, Crafting a Corporate Culture That Means Something, panelists are going to dig into how a company's roots and mission can weave itself into the whole company, from people to products to community, and how that culture can be responsive to the dynamic world that we live in now. So please join me in welcoming our panel, which will be moderated by Margot Roosevelt of the Los Angeles Times. Again, for the panel entitled Crafting a Corporate Culture That Means Something. Welcome, Margot and the panelists.
So we're excited to have such a distinguished panel to delve into various aspects of corporate culture. Introducing our guests from left to right, we have Ronald Reeves, who is head of diversity and inclusion for the U.S., Canada, Latin America, and Caribbean at AIG, the Multinational Finance and Insurance Corporation. Then next to him, we have Sarah Townsend, who's a business professor and researcher at the University of Southern California. And then next to her, Meagan Dorsch, who is head of social good at Visible, an all-digital wireless carrier. And then comes Elizabeth Morrison, who is vice president of diversity and belonging for Live Nation, the U.S. events promoter and venue operator. And then we have Bernie Knobbe, who is head of global benefits at AECOM, the multinational engineering and construction giant. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So here's a question for each of you to start things off. And although my questions are focused more on companies, Sarah, we're interested in your academic perspective, so don't hesitate to jump in too. During your experience, and we'll start at the very end and move this way, what was the most difficult challenge your company has faced involving your corporate culture, and what did you do about it?
So I work in the insurance industry, and I'm sure that most of you are thinking, when you think of the insurance industry, it's old, it's conservative, it's boring. I mean, that's what I hear when I go to the college campuses, and what do you know about insurance? And I work for a company that's 100 years old. But we've been on a journey over the last 7 years around how do we make our corporate culture more diverse and more inclusive. A lot of times what we hear on those campuses is, isn't your company very white? And they're amazed when they say, I've been there 20 years. And then they'll say, who else looks like you at your particular company? And so something that we're doing at AIG is we're being intentional about diversity and inclusion. I mean, some of the stats I'm just going to share really quickly, they're on our website. We have diversity at entry level. We have about 40% diversity. But then we see that diversity begin to dwindle when we get to the mid-level, where we're now allowing people to be people managers or subject matter experts. And then at the top of the house, that diversity even dips by 50%. And so what we're doing is we're being intentional about investing in some of our talent. We have a program that's focused on how do we get more women in the C-suite, and in particular, how we get more women of color. In the second program we have is for men of color, and how do we get them in the C-suite. And part of that is that networking, that exposure, that influence, and thinking strategic. And then in that middle level where we have 30% diversity, we're tripling down on our investment. We have an aging workforce, and that's probably what excites me the most. A lot of our most senior leaders are baby boomers and Generation X. The millennials, as we know, is the most diverse generation. So what we're talking about in our organization, how do we accelerate their development and include them in career experiences so that they can be considered for those roles when they become available? The other thing that I will just add, and I'll turn it over to my other panelists, our employee resource groups have been a tremendous help. I know some of you call them business resource groups, in helping us to shape our culture. We're fortunate. We have 132 in 37 different countries. We have 80 in the Americas that represent 13 different dimensions of diversity. They're helping us with recruiting. They're helping us to make our workplace more inclusive and belonging, and how we show up in the marketplace.
Sarah, you have some insight on this issue?
Sure, yeah. One of the things that I'm interested in research is kind of really subtle ways in which companies can convey their culture or can be inclusive or not inclusive. And something like employee resource groups, I think, are an excellent way to have people feel that they belong in the organization. But very small things, like something about how you structure, say, a demographic form. And so if you're someone who has multiple racial backgrounds, this maybe has occurred to you before, and if you're not, you maybe just blew by this, but forms, when they ask your racial or ethnic background, will sometimes say, check all that apply, and will sometimes say, check only one. And what we've found in a few studies is when people who have multiple racial backgrounds are given a demographic form that forces them to check only one, that this lowers their self-esteem, and it actually lowers their task performance as well. And so you can think about small ways that can convey whether the people are really able to bring their full, authentic selves to work, and giving them the ability to use their own categories as opposed to forcing them to use yours is one of those small ways.
That's fascinating and so relevant to California because there's so much mixture of ethnic backgrounds in partnerships and marriages. Meagan.
Hi, good morning. This is a fun day. We get to learn a lot and share a lot. I'm going to try to keep my comments concise because culture is something that I would love to talk about all day. Did it fall? Okay. So Visible is, in contrast to my friend here, our From Day One was just about 500 days ago. We are a startup. We are a wireless company. And while we might be a new company and a new player, the wireless industry is not. It is older, and so we are doing a digital forward brand, which means that we have no storefronts, and we are a direct-to-consumer play. So you would order your SIM card from us and then just place it into your phone and then have service. So it's interesting because 75% of our workforce are millennials, and our target demographic is millennial and Gen Z, although we say we are for everyone 18 to 80. It's just a digital forward. So I think that one of the ways in starting a company, we got together as a founding group and really it was talked about on one of the other panels about deciding what your core values are and how you show up as an organization. And my role in social good is how we show up in the community, both internally and externally. And so we took a very different approach. We did look at, is one-to-one the new model of giving? You know, like how do you make an impact? And we went at it a little bit differently. First off, our social good is an accelerator program for nonprofits who are using mobile tech to bring change or goods to their community. So we don't stand on an issue. We haven't chosen an issue. We have said we are for this small tech innovative community that is driving change in a whole new way, and that's through a mobile device. And so that has been wildly different. And good, bad, or crazy, we launched our accelerator program 6 months before we ever had a single customer. So yay, so we were out there like doing good and having impact and driving change, and we had no customers. So it was amazing. So happy to talk about that if you want sometime.
So what are some of the nonprofits who are using this mobile tech? I mean, what are the three biggest ones that you've given the most help to? So.
You're making me choose. I love that you asked that, though, because they are amazing, and they're from all over the United States. The largest cohort that we have has actually come from the Silicon Valley here in Northern California. We work with an organization called Talking Points in our first year, which was last year. This is only year 2. Talking Points is a nonprofit that launched a mobile app that translates into 25 different languages and allows teachers in Title I schools to communicate with every parent that they teach of their students. Another organization that we work with in this cohort is Objective Zero. They are a national organization that provides mental health resources and PTSD counseling to veterans. And a third group that we work with, it is out of New York City. It's called Good Call, and it ensures that every individual who is arrested has access to legal representation at the point of arrest. They are really doing criminal justice reform, but at that moment of arrest. And so it's like, oh my gosh, I could talk forever. But those are just 3 of the amazing 16 that we've helped. But it truly is a very different way of going about bringing change, and I can't talk highly enough about these amazing nonprofits that we get to support.
That's so interesting. So
Thank you. We'll talk.
interesting.
We'll talk
yeah,
afterwards.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, Elizabeth.
So first of all, I thought I had the coolest title, but I think you might have
think you
the
do,
coolest
too.
title.
I
I don't know. We can fight for it
Speak
after the
up a
panel.
little.
Okay,
Little
speak up
louder.
a little. Sorry, thank you. So a little bit about Live Nation. I think the question originally was like about a crisis of culture and how did you overcome it. I can hear it when I can't turn my head towards you. Okay. And we haven't had any crises. Live Nation culture has really been driven in large part by our CEO, and I'm smiling at 2 of my colleagues that are sitting in the audience, Michael Rapino. He truly believes in investing in people, and our company is about 14 years old, so somewhere between 500 and 20 years. That's when we became kind of the Live Nation that everybody knows today. That was when we did the acquisition of Ticketmaster, which was our largest and most powerful acquisition. But we are a company built on acquisitions, and we're also a highly decentralized organization. And we go out into the market and we buy organizations because they're really good at what they do, and we want them to join Live Nation and continue to be really good at what they do and the way that they've done it. So they don't come in and there's this big, integration project and they're automatically on our benefits and they're, automatically using our learning and development and all of our resources. We kind of bring them on board and they're allowed to kind of slowly develop and figure out what from Live Nation they would like to, utilize, and then what they're going to keep that's going to be uniquely their own. But in terms of like how the culture has really been shaped over these last 14 years, going back to investing in employees, our kind of core mantra and belief is around taking care of our own. And our head of benefits is in the audience, and she's been integral in really helping drive that home and expand the program. We actually have a core benefit called Taking Care of Our Own, where employees who are in personal straits that could be solved by a financial gift can write an email to the Taking Care of Our Own hotline or email, whatever you want to call it, and literally receive a grant from the company that is a gift. It's not a loan, there's no interest, there's no payback, there's no penalty, and it is not only is it utilized, but there's a halo effect from that, with employees really seeing in real time that the company cares about them and is willing to invest in them. We also go really above and beyond when it comes to our benefits. In terms of being inclusive, we have a really cool benefit I was telling these guys earlier called roadie babies, and it means that like roadie, like you're a roadie on a crew, but if you are traveling and you'd like to take your child 2 years and under and a caregiver with you, the company will pay for their travel and pay for their hotel accommodations. So yeah, it's really big. It was announced 6 months ago. Thanks. Yeah, we expanded to 6 months paid maternity leave. We have, I'm trying to think of some of the other benefits. The other part of, so we have the actual health and medical benefits. We're also really invested in growth and development programs. So we have Mentor Nation, we have Future Nation, obviously a mentor program, a growth and development program, really cool discounts and partnerships. Every employee gets 4 free tickets, plus we have something called Ticket Concierge that gives out tickets. Like, I swear, I think we get 10 to 15 emails a week saying, do you, your friends and family want to go here, want to go there? So they really promote and generate this culture that is not defined, by the way, by key corporate values. So if you go on our website, you'll see a few things we believe in, like the power of live and entrepreneurship, but there's not like, these are the 5 core values of Live Nation Entertainment. It's taking care of our own, and that's how we operate and run the business.
Bernie.
Wow. Tough act to follow. I feel like it's the Vanessa Williams, save the best for last. Okay, so I'll just say, I'm representing a global benefits function, so thank you for the call out about benefits programs. We think they're really important too. Our organization is not 100 years old, but we're 108 companies combined over the last 30 years. So some of the same complexity, but also very different. And we have multiple generations of workforce in our organization. We're 85,000 employees around the world, 100 plus countries. So all the complexity you could ever hope for is exactly what we have. So when I was asked to talk about culture, I thought, well, don't give me a microphone since that's how I'm holding notes. But I feel like there's a couple of things that I want to share with you that I think is a takeaway. And I feel like these opportunities are really important. I'm learning from them, and I'm hoping you're going to learn from us. So there is no 23andMe for an annual report, right? You can't send that in and find out about the DNA or culture of a company. You need to find that out by talking less and listening more. So I've been at AECOM a little over 5 years, and that's one of the things I learned right away was you can read on the website and you can hear about the culture, but the reality is it's really about the people. And our average age is 47. We're a very diverse organization, but we also have a lot of new, young engineers coming in who will work for us because they want to build something really cool in the world, or design something really amazing, or they want to help in a part of the world that has no water, right? So they have a real passion around the work they're doing, but we also have another part of our workforce that have been there 30 plus years. They do structural engineering, it's what they do, they like it, and they don't necessarily need to be cool, they just need to do really good work and safe work. So what we did when we looked at our culture is we said from a benefits perspective, we decided to focus on well-being. And I know that's a term that's used very generally now, but it's true. And so we spent the last 2 years putting in a global well-being program that maybe next question I'll talk a little bit about that specific-wise. But what we realized is tap into the business. We're about safety. Right? We build One World Trade Center. We build subway systems in Hong Kong. So if we do that, we better make sure we're taking care of our own, which is a similar concept. And so we said, sometimes it's hard to get investments in the HR programs that we want to implement, but tie it to the business and everyone listens and everyone supports it. And so I'll just end on this, and that is, I have an accounting background, so I don't feel like I'm an HR person, but human is in my first name because I'm in human resources. So I always think about the employee, but I also think about the financial side, because the only way you get support is if you have the financials to go with it. So when you think about what you're doing and how you're looking to change the culture, ROI can be two things. It's return on investment, it's also return on individual. And I think that's how you cross and bridge that gap between HR and finance, and that's how you can deliver on a culture that maybe you're trying to deliver on. So that's my initial opening thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Actually, the two eyes is a good segue into our next question, which is, all of you, I'm sure, read about the Business Roundtable statement recently. 181 CEOs said that we aren't just going to focus on shareholder returns anymore. We're also going to think about our employees and our community and factor that into our strategy. And do you see this as an issue for corporate culture? And if so, has your company taken any particular steps, and I'm asking for specifics here, to move away from a shareholder-only model of behavior? Let's start with Ron again.
So at AIG, in this last year, we have created a role called the Chief Sustainability Officer. We partner very well. It's come partly out of that particular work. Yes, we want AIG's shareholders to make money, but it's also been driven by a lot by our employee resource groups who, what you're finding with the I generation, I want technology, I want diversity, and I want to be able to give back to the community and do meaningful work. And we not only mitigate risk, but we're talking about how do we help the communities that we're in thrive. Being fully transparent, a lot of the organizations that we supported in the past, they were some of the pet projects of our most senior execs. What we love about our employee resource groups, we actually give them funding to go into organizations in the community and make an impact. What we're beginning to do through the sustainability piece, where are the trends that we are seeing that our employees are passionate about, and how do we make a bigger investment, whether that's with resources or money? Another group that we are involved with is Enactus. Some of you may be familiar. These are college students. They work in teams around innovation, but they're really helping us to think through floods and how to recover potable water. And then the third area that we're focusing in is going into countries where we can provide microinsurance. And so we're in places like India, helping women with women's health and women mortality, or in South America, where we're trying to help farmers recover from floods, or in Africa. How do we help them to sustain? And so for us at AIG, it's not just always the big picture, it's what can we do to help the markets that we are in to thrive?
Great. So I think I'll say something relevant and then maybe take a slight detour towards my research so I can speak on something I know a lot about. And one thing I think the difference between the two I's, sometimes we set it up like it's a dichotomy or a forced choice and that you're focused on one or the other, but there's certainly a lot of research out there, not my own, that suggests that taking care of your employees, taking care of your own, does also benefit your shareholders. And so one of the ways of maximizing revenues is also to make sure you have, like, the communities that you serve are doing well, and that your employees are feeling like they belong and can perform well because of that. And one of the sort of other unseen, subtle areas of inclusion that I've looked at is social class diversity. So that's something, kind of outside the typical race, gender that we talk about. And this is people who are the first in their families to go to college, but they have a college degree and are from working class, lower income backgrounds. And people will enter organizations where the value statements are, we collaborate and we care about cooperation, and that's very attractive to that population. But what we're finding is that if you don't back that up with having employees actually working together and collaborating, that this disconnect between what you say you're valuing and what people are actually doing day to day causes issues. And then you face, so people who are in corporations where they say they value cooperation but are not actually working with others on a day-to-day basis show like 13% greater turnover intentions, 11% lower feelings of like comfort and fit, or I would say belonging. And so it's important to think, and I like this idea that it's not just about your value statements, and those are important ways to convey culture, but it's also about what people are doing on the ground.
Meagan?
Agree. Thank you. I realized, too, in the last question you asked is about the challenges. To sum up our challenge, it's growth. We've doubled our employee base in 1 year. And so I think going back to starting a new company, and in full transparency, Verizon is our parent company. We are a subsidiary of Verizon, but we had the benefit of some of the founders of our company came from the industry that realized this has become really difficult. Like, getting a wireless subscription or service is very complicated. The field is very crowded, and the onus has been put on the consumer to figure out what's best for them. So one of the goals in launching Visible was to make it easy, simple. We started with you had to bring your own device, and it was one plan. We still only have one plan. It's $40 unlimited talk, text, and data, but that is the plan. But what we did is turn to our members, that's what we call our customers, and said, what do you want? Like, what do you want from a wireless provider? And we heard things like, we want a Wi-Fi hotspot. Like, we want, family plans that aren't for families. And so these are things we've rolled out in just the last 9 months to our consumers, because the focus is asking our consumers, what do you want? And then we hope to roll that out next year, more so on our Visible Connector, our nonprofit, our social good program, and ask our consumers again, what change do you want to see? How do you want to be part of this? So it's making those that invest in your company part of the plan from day one and going forward. That's kind of our take on it.
Elizabeth?
Again, our core belief is around investing in our employees. So we can't generate shareholder value without generating employee value. So that is and has been our path to success. I think what we have done is the last few years we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated with that. I've been at Live Nation for about 2.5 years. We've had diversity and belonging or diversity and inclusion for about 5 years. So there was a team before me. We're now up to over 45 ERGs in our global markets. Some of the benefits that I didn't mention earlier, we have something called Mindful Nation. That's meditation in the workplace. Next year we're launching Hope Nation, which is about mental health, mental awareness. So we're really getting more and more aware and nuanced in how we deliver that value to our employees, because the better they feel, the more they feel they belong and they get that sense of safety, that's when their true potential and talents are unleashed. If you're not thinking about code switching or covering, or does someone like my hair, am I too aggressive, am I angry, am I, all of these other labels and commentaries that are running through your head, and you're like, okay, people are looking at me and they are seeing me, and this company actually cares for me. Like if I get in an accident and I can't afford to repair my car, and I've got kids, I've got to get to school, and I've got to get to work, I can literally write an email and they will give me $1,000. And when I say that we take that seriously, our CEO reads each and every submission that comes in to taking care of our own. There was one instance where a decision was made that he didn't weigh in, and he was like, what happened? He wants to know the issues of the employees. He literally, at every town hall, at every meeting that he has that he's employee facing, he gives out his email. He literally has an open door policy where he's like, come to me, and he is responsive. I've sent him something that isn't critical, but it's just information I thought he needed to know. Immediate response, like 8 o'clock at night. I was like, okay, you could have read that tomorrow. But thank you. So hyper responsive, and that's the example that he sets for the executives that work for him.
So Bernie, my question was kind of oriented towards evolution. Has there been actually, there's been a change in the zeitgeist, as to whether this hyper focus on shareholder value, these quarterly, reports, et cetera, have, people are really questioning that and saying, this is really not a good thing for our society, not a good thing for the employees. Has there been any changes, I guess? Has there been any, particular steps that your company has taken to move away from that model? That was kind of the my question wasn't sort of oriented towards, we've always been terrific. We're still terrific,
We're on a journey to be terrific. Let's go with that. And we don't have a cool name like Nation as our last name, so it's really hard to come up with something that goes with AECOM. So what we did instead is, well, first of all, we did use the data that says shareholder value is increased if you focus on employees' wellness and well-being. And we needed that substantiation to actually do what we wanted to do. We also looked at our claim information for 3 years and realized people who participate in the wellness program had 18% lower healthcare costs than our non-employees who did not. Those are the data points you need to even start. So I'm all about realistic but optimistic, right? It's like anything's possible. When we looked at doing a global well-being program, everyone said you have no budget, you're trying to do it around the world, it can't be done. We went from a global well-being day to a global well-being week, and this year it was a global well-being month because we couldn't get it all in. People come. It's sort of my, Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come moment. Maybe it's because we're in LA, but the whole idea here is like, stay focused and focus on the things that employees care about. So the first year of the program, it was called My Way to Be Well. Sounds kind of cool. The second year was My Reason to Be Well. Is it your employee? Is it your manager? Is it your family member? Is it your pet, which is what applies to me? And then our last year was My Moment to Be Well. Everybody's really busy. Take a minute. Take 5 minutes a day. You can be much happier and think about the 5 things you're grateful for, and that will change your perspective for the rest of the day. So we use those campaigns, but we also know our culture. We're engineers. People don't always believe what you tell them. So what we started doing 3 years ago is putting employee photos in everything we do. So every time we send out something related to communicating this program, it's got a picture of a team doing something, it's got a picture of a family doing something, but we also brought in community relations, I&D, we call it I&D, D&I, and we also brought in the health and safety groups, and what we found was they had great stories too. So we created an Instagram and a Twitter account. You send in your photos, you get well-being points, which counts towards other things you get, but it also is about the employees. It's not about the company telling you, it's about employees going, this is great, it works for me, and here's my family and I doing something that's fun, but also well-being focused. So I'm really big about just doing it, getting out there, learning from the participants and the individuals in your organization, and that to me is how you take the current culture and start to influence and change it over time. And so we have done it, and global is not impossible. You can do varying degrees across the different parts of the world, but at the very end of the day, stress is an issue. We have PTO. We call it pretend time off sometimes because it doesn't feel like you really get to take the time, but actually, but you do but it's your choice, and you work with your manager and you figure it out, right? And so we have a lot of the same programs others do. What I'm trying to do, because I don't always have the budget, is look at it a little bit differently. And I worked at Gap, Yahoo, Hilton, visuals, right? So I'll just show you something real quick. These are stress blocks, not stress balls, but we build things. So what we did is we gave all employees these and said, build something in your office and take a photo. And we're going to do a contest. And we had 250 submissions. I didn't even know we had that many offices. And the reality is, people came together and they wrote us and said, I've worked here 5 years. I don't even know who sits next to me. But because we did this, people got involved and they got excited. I actually wanted a stress ball food fight contest at all the offices, but health and safety said, no, that's not going to work. So we came up with this instead. But this is not expensive, but these are still sitting around 2 years later. I mean, this is what it's about, right? Give them something simple, but something that lives on, so you can see the passion I have about this. But that's some of the things we've done to try to create a culture and then keep it alive, and also take it out of US-centric and take it to the rest of the world, because that's the problem many of us have, is we're very focused here, but we forget about the groups outside the US. So, thank you.
I am struck that you emphasized the wellness issue. You know, as we all know, wellness has, become a very popular thing for corporations to talk about and, put programs in. But has your company raised its premiums on healthcare? Has it raised its copays in the last, 5 or 10 years? That's a wellness issue.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of benefits related to preventive and ways to address mindfulness, things like that. But from a cost perspective, we're also a very financially driven organization. So we do ask employees to share in the cost. So I wouldn't say that they've necessarily benefited from that, but those that participate in the well-being and wellness programs pay less than the others. So we are about rewarding those who do take advantage of the programs, but for those that don't, they do pay more. So we are holding people a little more accountable, which I actually think is a good thing. And we also heard about spouse and partner. And not just because we're in California, but that was a big issue. So we actually put them in the wellness requirement 2 years ago. It's the whole family. If you don't get everybody to change behavior, well, the employee alone isn't going to do it. But we also said we have no way to get communications to my spouse or partner. So we actually have a newsletter now. When you just click on it, it says a note like, hi, hon, how are you? By the way, here's something benefits sent out this month, and you can just forward it directly to them. So we've sort of tried to make it where you're accountable, but it's kind of easy. And then we also created a website for all of our benefits that any of you can go to. You don't need a sign in or a login, and all of our benefit information's there. And we can use it for potential new hires. So we're just trying to make it very transparent and simple, and also bringing in the whole family.
But overall, your premiums have risen and your copays have risen. And
we have the same problem everybody
same
does.
question for the two other large companies here. You're a startup, so maybe a little different. What about Live Nation and what about AIG? How much of your premiums and how much of your copays gone up?
I mean, I can't give the specific amounts. I know this year they are flat. In the past they have gone up, but I think what you've heard from the panelists, we work for for-profit companies and we have investors. And so the employees understand that the investors want to make money, but what we find is our employees are outperforming when you take care of me. What's in this for me? And so in terms of like our benefits now, we're engaging our employee resource groups because typically there has been a group that may not have been as inclusive making those decisions about those benefits. And so when that increase goes up, what I see in some of our groups, I got this. Now, so we have a surrogacy benefit that our LGBTQ plus ERG helped us to think through. And so for me, there have been some trade-offs. And what they're saying is this environment that I work in, I want to be able to do my best work. I want to be able to bring my whole self to work. I don't want to mask. And if you give me that kind of environment, I'm okay, AIG. That our stock price is going up. But what I also hear, could we have a stock option program too, that we share in the benefits? As you grow, we grow.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think first of all, the healthcare system in the United States is just a mess, and costs are ridiculous. And companies are shouldering a lot of that, and yes, it's being passed on to employees. I think that the evolution of our benefits, and a lot of our benefits ideas have come from employees. Mindful Nation was started by an employee. Hope Nation is started by someone that worked on a tour. So we are listening, and we are trying to compensate or balance the scales as costs continue to rise. We do our best to mitigate those, but also to improve both the depth and breadth of our benefits, and also delivering meaningful benefits that are going to help you, like the roadie babies and the Mindful Nation, et cetera, you know, live your life in a more holistic way.
So we only have 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask one last question and just ask you to, you know, the company representatives on this panel maybe to give me like 3 sentences on this subject. Whistleblowers are forcing corporate culture issues out into the public domain, and we're seeing a lot of publicity over corporate bad behavior. We're seeing Boeing ignoring safety issues, we're seeing Wells Fargo's fake accounts, we're seeing Volkswagen's fake emission reporting, we're seeing pharma companies pushing unneeded opioids. What sort of avenues have your company, has your company created for employees to report illegal or unethical behavior to managers? And I'm going to ask you to keep it short since we're almost out of time.
So at AIG, we have a Raise Your Hand campaign. And we do want employees, if you see something that you think is illegal, immoral, unethical, we want you to raise your hand. We also put in our managers' goals. That what are you doing to educate your teams, and how are you empowering them around being able to raise their hands? And then the third thing that we do is we provide, our leaders have upward feedback, and so we have a way of checking that. We're asking our employees, how comfortable do you feel in raising unethical, immoral issues? I don't know the exact stating of the question, so that's the other check that we have.
That's great.
I'll just add to this that 1/3, the surveys show that 1/3 of employees who report bad behavior face retaliation. So, Meagan?
Yeah, I would say some of the similar programs as well. We also have like skip levels with employees and managers, and goes all the way up to our CEO. I also think one of our core values is transparency, and if the behaviors I think you're talking about, we also want to take a look internally and make sure we're not setting up scenarios where something is driving that negative behavior, like whether it be some type of incentive or bonus. I mean, that's not realistic in our case, but we want to make sure we're not rewarding or putting our employees in a position that they would act that way in order to meet a company goal. I think the examples that you give are very deep rooted, and it's not just employee behavior, but definitely we're trying to do things that would avoid us finding ourselves in that same position.
Yeah, and I will build on that and say, you know, we have the confidential hotline, and we talk about it with our people managers, et cetera. But we took a step back and we enhanced the training that we offer around anti-harassment and discrimination. So we now have world-class trainers that come in and do our live anti-harassment training. We do bystander training. We also leverage our ERGs as part of that to do pilots and be out there and be part of the conversation. So wanting to make sure that our employees know what's right and what's wrong, because we operate in a world of gray. It's concerts and live entertainment. You know, people are working at venues. Alcohol is being served. It is a unique environment, and we need to prepare our employees to look and use their judgment and be aware of what they're doing. You're still at work. Even when you go out for drinks after work, if you're a manager, you're still at work.
Can I add on to that? When we talked about retaliation, we've been able to leverage our employee relations team, which they were seeing some of that in their reports, and we were able to build in some training to up-train our people manager. What does retaliatory, I can't say it, behaviors look like? Retaliatory.
That just means you don't have the problem.
Right,
Okay.
that means it doesn't exist.
The only thing, actually, we have a lot of what was discussed here. The only thing I would add is that we actually have required mandatory training for all employees. And it's actually, it's a 1 hour required training. It talks about all those things about retaliation and bad behavior and sexual harassment, all those things that you would expect, but all employees are required. And if you don't complete it, the list goes all the way to the senior leadership. You don't want to be on that list, right? So that is one thing that we do. The other is because of the work that we do, people actually get called out and can recognized for speaking up when things are either a safety issue or they have a concern. And then the last thing is a lot of our business is government related as well. And so we have a lot of audits and ethical requirements that we have to meet in order to do business with the government. And so all those things require us to have really strong training and also a strong focus on it. So I think we have it, but it's similar to a lot what's talked about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.